All right. And are you okay with people asking questions as you go along?
Sure. Yeah.
Stuff?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I'm wearing the microphone, I think, especially just to get the audio through to the Zoom, because there are a lot of...
There's if you want to turn it down, you can turn the volume
Okay.
down on the side, but it's up to you. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
If you put it maybe kind of below your mouth. Yeah, there you go.
That's perfect. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. So yeah, thanks for having me. I've been here in the Baltimore area since June 8th. So I'm up here right now because my wife, she's doing a career change and she got a paid internship. She's doing software engineering. So I teach in Miami. I teach Italian and Portuguese, which isn't really relevant to what I'm going to be talking about today. But so I have the summer off. So I've been, really enjoying getting to know some of your natural areas. I've spent some time at Patuxent. Where else have I been? Patuxent Mountain, Gunpowder Falls. So I really enjoyed getting around. But yeah, I'm going to talk to you today about iNaturalist. And my understanding is maybe most of you are familiar already with iNaturalist.
We had a workshop here, I think, in April, but probably many of the people here were not there, so we can assume they don't have a lot of knowledge.
Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about iNaturalist. I'm just going to move to my next slide here. And at the end, I'm also going to have a QR code and a link. So if you want to access this presentation, I'm going to have my email there. I'm always trying to get more people into iNaturalist and to see kind of what a great tool it is, because a lot of people just view it as an app, right? Maybe those of you that have heard of it, you've heard of the app, but it's also a website. So this is what I'm going to go over mostly. I'm going to have that brief intro to iNat. I'm going to talk about annotations on iNaturalist, and I'm going to focus specifically on the life stage for LEPs. I'm going to talk about observation fields, and I'm going to provide some examples of how those would work for documenting flower visitation, whether it's in your yard or somewhere else. I'm also going to talk about leaf miners, right? So just real quick, how many of you are familiar with what a leaf miner is? Okay, so I only see one hand. So I'll talk about them, and then I'm also going to talk about an observation field for host plants, so that you can kind of tie in. Let's say you find a leaf miner on a specific type of plant, you make that connection. So, and then if there's time, I'm going to kind of explain how to do these things. So essentially what I'm trying to do is show you what you can do with iNaturalist. How to do it can be, it takes a little bit of practice. I have some videos where I kind of explain it, so that's why I don't want to take too much time explaining exactly how to do it now. But I'll talk about it a little bit if there's time. So, community science, right? Also known as citizen science. What is it exactly? It's essentially taking data that is collected by the general public and turning it into, something that you can look at, learn from. It's stuff that's regularly used by researchers, etc. So this is in the state of Maryland, Isabella tiger moth. So far in the state of Maryland, there have been 2,000 different observations of this moth, whether it was an adult, a caterpillar, whatever stage it was found in. And then this little map here.
It's a woolly bear, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
We've all seen the woolly bears.
The woolly bear. I actually read a little bit about that because we have them in South Florida, but they're kind of rare. So I read a little bit more about them because it's kind of cool that there's this spike here in the fall months. And if you're familiar with the woolly bear caterpillar, I'm sure more of you have seen it in fall than any other time of year. And then these orange bits here, that's in the adult stage. So this is it shows that there are two peaks of the flight of the moth during May and June, and then again in August. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, essentially what community science is we're taking this data that somebody doesn't even need to know what they're finding. You can just post it on iNaturalist, someone will identify it, and then it's helping us learn about how things may be changing or staying the same, etc. So what is iNaturalist itself? It's essentially a website. It's an app. And what it does is it helps people to document what they find, to identify what they find, whether it's plants, animals, fungi, really anything. You can take a picture of something under a microscope and post that on iNaturalist and get an ID. Also, this all goes into a database. And this is where it's kind of underutilized. People don't realize that when you post something, it's not just about learning what you found, but you can also look through what other people have found and learn about what you'll find in a certain area, whether it's right in your backyard, whether it's at a park down the street, or if you're traveling somewhere. So it's been really helpful for me to learn about what I'm seeing here because I can see what other people are posting here in the Baltimore area. And it's also kind of got a social thing going where you can connect with other people about nature. So that's kind of generally what iNaturalist is. And so essentially what we're doing is we're taking, this picture here, which, a lot of people like to post on social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, but it kind of takes the science out of what you are finding, right? It becomes a data point. So I'm going to click on this really quick. I'm assuming that this species is probably unfamiliar to most people because it's it's called a faithful beauty. Let me see where they've been documented, right? So this is, again, just an example of how iNaturalist works. All those little orange points are observations that people have posted, right? So if you didn't know anything about the faithful beauty moth, you can pop onto iNaturalist and kind of look at a distribution map, and that is all based on what people have posted. It's not based on predictions. Each one of those is actually somebody taking a picture of it and putting it on there. So, you can click on any of these little points and get more information about, when it was seen. So this one was seen on November 23rd, 2019. And yeah, in the Bahamas. So it takes that picture and it turns it into a data point, right? You can see here that we can see the date, October 6, 2019. This is the one from Florida. And then this is the identification. This is kind of how it works, where people are confirming the identification of that moth. And this is a moth, by the way. I know it looks kind of like a butterfly, but it looks like a what? A bird.
Yeah, it looks kind of neat.
Yeah, it looks like it definitely a piece of it got lit. But what was I going to say about? Oh yeah, a funny nickname that this moth has is people call it the Uncle Sam moth because it has the red white. So that's a cool moth. I love pointing that one out. So we're taking these photos and turning them into data points. You could also post audio. So if you get a bird singing or grasshopper singing, you could post that as well and maybe get an identification. Okay, so a little bit more about what's being done with what you post on iNaturalist, right? When you contribute the data, iNaturalist puts it into this database, and it's so easy to explore, specifically on the website, not so much on the app, but to explore and kind of, if you want to search what moths have been seen in this area, there's a way to do that. If you want to see what moths have been seen in this area in the months of July and August, there's a way to do that, right? And you can zoom into a neighborhood, you can zoom in to a park, etc. All right, so that's easy to do with the Explore section. And again, it's best done on a computer. If you do it through the app, it's kind of a little bit more limited. So I'll try to quickly show how that works. So right now what I have is a filter set for Maryland, and I have it set to show lepidoptera, right, butterflies and moths. So you can see that up here. So far in Maryland, people have contributed 281,000 observations, and that's just in the state of Maryland. Okay, and that represents 2,284 different species, and this is the amount of people that have been involved with posting those observations. So almost 12,000 different observers that have posted, collected this data, and it's all right here for you to look through. Yeah.
Is this the same as through Seek?
So when you use Seek, there is an option to have it posted to iNaturalist. But if you don't post it to iNaturalist, then that data doesn't go into this database. But I have seen observations where you could tell it was posted through Seek. So sometimes they do go through. It depends on whether the person chooses to do that. All right, so I'm going to click filters here just to give you an idea of how you'd be able to do something like this, right? Right now I have the location set to Maryland. You see that here. This is where I have the whatever species or taxa that you want to look at, in this case Lepidoptera, and then we can come over here to months, and we can see which ones have been seen in the months of July. And then now that filter is run, so those that large amount of observations, it got cut down a little bit because now we're only looking at the month of July, and so we went from I think 2,800 species to 1,500 species. You can also click on this map to get kind of a different view, and then this shows where people have posted pictures of moths so far, or butterflies and moths. And you can zoom in here, and we can zoom into where we are. So let's see if I can find this road. So I'm going to click read and search and map area now, and now it's going to show me specifically moths that have been seen just, from more or less Morgan State University to the west to close to this Middle River area, I guess, close to the Montes State Airport. And then now we're to 234 observations. You can look at them, right? So again, we're getting, whether it's a caterpillar, whether it's an adult, so a moth or a butterfly, skippers, etc. And you can see all of this data. So it's really fun to kind of check what people have been finding in your neighborhood. And this is updated instantly. So if somebody just posted something right now, it'll pop up in here as well. So that's kind of how exploring works. And I'm going to go on. So annotations. Okay? So annotations is like an extra thing that you can do on iNaturalist where you can kind of add extra information to what you post. All right, it's a standardized thing, and I'll kind of explain that more in a second. And so the main ones that you get with Lepidoptera are whether it was alive or dead. So, if you find a dead caterpillar or a dead butterfly, you can post that. And that could be, if there's like a trend of, wow, look at how many were found dead in this time. Maybe they sprayed for midges and look at, so there are so many ways that you can kind of keep an eye on what's going on with that. Evidence of presence, that's if you find like the actual organism. If you find, maybe like just a piece of a broken wing, you can mark it as such. Then there's the life stage, and then there's the sex, so if it's a male or a female, sometimes you can tell. So this is an example of a butterfly that I posted here on July 14th, a clouded sulfur, and then down here at the bottom is where you can see the annotation section. Okay, so again, this is on the website, and we're going to be focusing on the life stage. So I'm going to go to this next section just to show you what the data looks like, right? So I kind of showed this already at the beginning. And I wanted to make a little comparison. So top left, we have some the data for Maryland. So that's 2013 observations. And then here, don't ask me why I chose Minnesota. I just chose Minnesota to compare with Maryland, mostly because it's like a colder place, right? It's more inland. It's a little bit further north. And so I wanted to get a comparison on the flight of this tiger moth, right? And again, I'm not a researcher. I'm just here this is curiosity, right? So I was wondering what the flight would look like. In fact, let me go to the next slide because I think I can show you. Yeah, I put kind of a more zoomed in example. So what we have here from left to right are the months. So January, February, March, all the way to December. Same thing on the bottom. And then on the left, you have the amount of observations. And it's the same for both. So notice what's going on here with the Maryland, with the adults, right? The orange ones are the adults. And then the orange ones are the adults also for Minnesota. What do we see in terms of the flight pattern? What do you guys think? What's the difference? Because they're not the same.
Looks like two different populations, maybe.
Two different flights, right? Yeah. So, but when you look at Minnesota, they only have one flight, which is in the month of June, and it's probably because, summer comes later and it doesn't last as long. So I guess, you can kind of make that. That's something that you can, conclusion you can come to, right? And then the other cool thing is that we have this big spike for both Maryland and Minnesota in the fall months when people are finding the larvae, right, which are the woolly bear, the caterpillars. And then I noticed that Minnesota, a lot of people are also seeing them in March, April, and May. So I'm guessing that the caterpillars might be more active because, towards the fall months, they didn't have enough time to eat. And so these caterpillars, what they do is they essentially, in the winter months, they have like something in their hemolymph, which is kind of like their blood, and they can survive below freezing temperature. So that's something really interesting about them. But I think the ones in Minnesota, they kind of have to wake up in March and April and keep eating, whereas the ones in Maryland probably already ate enough towards the end of, August, September, when there's that big peak, and then they're able to turn into moths sooner than these Minnesota moths that are still having to eat. So, it's kind of a cool way to see this data. And again, it's only possible to do this if people annotate their observations and mark them as being either an adult or a larvae. So now I wanted to compare the giant leopard moth, right? If any of you went, I don't think did anybody go to the moth night? Okay, so you all went. Did you guys see a giant leopard moth?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I recognize you. Yeah, okay.
You would set up the black light.
Right.
It's the UV light, right?
Yeah, black light, UV light, that's right.
Yeah,
So,
it really worked out.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think there's another one on Friday if any of you are interested in going with Natural History Society.
There's one on September 2nd that's for club members only, too.
Oh,
But
okay.
that one's going to be somewhere else. It's up in like Hartford County.
Yeah, these blacklighting events, or the light events, it's really cool for seeing a lot of different moths. So Maryland, the giant leopard moth, and then Florida, so similar amount of observations, right? 1,500 and 1,600, and then it's cool because again you can see there's a flight for this moth, and again this is just provided by the data that people, somebody, oh look, a moth, they post it and they don't even realize how cool the data is that they're contributing to what people can see. So look at that flight, that big peak, the orange right here, in the month of June and July, right? And then down here in Florida, sunny Florida, right, there's more flights of the adults because they don't have to worry so much about the cooler temperatures, the winter temperatures. And another cool thing that you can see here is that there's kind of like, there tends to be a fluctuation where, this is like a peak of the caterpillars, and then over here there aren't so many caterpillars because they all turned into adults, right? And then here they're basically finding each other, they're mating, and then, caterpillars are born, and then that starts all over again, right? And in Florida, you can see the same pattern. There's a peak here in adults, they're mating, and then here there are more caterpillars because those are, the eggs that have hatched. So yeah, that's kind of what you can get from annotating your observations, okay? Oh, I had a closer look at that. I forgot I could have gone to the next slide. But yeah, so you see what I mean about it's fun seeing the undulations, right? Caterpillars, and then the caterpillars go down because they're adults. So, all right, observation fields. And I'm going to talk about how to annotate your observations. If I have time, I think I will. But observation fields are also really cool. So these are not standardized. In fact, let me go back so I can show you what I mean when I talk about standardized. Click on this observation. All right, so this is that cloud and sulfur that I saw. Let me see, where was I when I saw this? Was this at? Oh, this was on a trip to Hart Miller Island, which, I went with the Natural History Society, so that was really cool. So here it is down here. You click on annotations, right? And you can see that you can mark it as being alive or dead, right? This butterfly was alive. Evidence of presence. So this was an organism. If you find, it'd be pretty crazy to find scat, right? Scat is poop. Butterfly poop, and you can recognize
well,
that
there's caterpillar frass. You can
right.
see underneath the milkweed if monarchs are eating it.
That's true. But so, you can recognize it if it's under the right plants. So that would make sense. And then, I don't know if this is male or female. There may be a way to tell because I know a lot of butterflies do have that sexual dimorphism. But yeah, so you see I marked it here as being an adult. So that's how you do it. It's not too hard. It's standardized, and I'm going to talk about observation fields in a second, which is where you can kind of type in whatever observation field you want, and it's not standardized. So maybe I'll get to that. So let's jump way forward to the observation fields. Okay, so you can even make your own. So some people do create their own observation fields, and it's possible to view the data in several ways. So I'm going to talk specifically about two, which are the ones that I use the most, and a lot of other people on iNaturalist use a lot. So the first one, it's got a kind of clunky name, but it's just the one that more people use. It says interaction, visited flower of, right? So that's the one on the left, and that's, anybody know what type of skipper that is? Yeah? Viator. I'm not sure. I don't know the skipper from here. Let me see what it was identified as. Yeah, there you go, Poani's Viator. So broad-winged skipper, right? Very good. And then, does anybody recognize the plant that it's visiting? It's kind of a bad picture.
Kind of blurry, yeah.
It's a blurry picture. It's tough. So I separately posted a picture of that flower because I wanted to know and hopefully add this identification and the observation field. And so it is narrowleaf mountain mint, right?
Hey, I got some of that.
Okay. Yeah, I saw so many different things: bees, skippers, butterflies.
I tell people it's a pollinator magnet.
It is a pollinator.
Yeah, you see everything on there.
I think this was a landscape plant. Yeah, this was at Fort McHenry. So I went to Fort McHenry, and they kind of have like a little pollinator garden. They had a huge patch of this narrowleaf mountain.
It's native, I think. To
Yeah. It's always nice when people plant natives in the, because sometimes they don't.
It is mint, so it'll take over, right?
Right.
You gotta kind of keep an eye on it, but it's totally cool.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the observation field down here. This is another way to view the data. I'm going to maybe talk about that later, just to show you some examples of this narrow leaf mountain mint being visited by all kinds of different things, right? So again, this is a way to collect this data and see it. So far, this is worldwide, 259 observations have been annotated to specify, hey, this is this insect and it's visiting this type of plant, right? Narrowleaf mountain mint. And you can scroll through and it's kind of fun to look at, right? You can see, and if you were to sell plants, you can be like, hey, look at all these things that you're gonna get in your yard, right? So I'm always thinking to myself, I gotta start selling plants because I have this like way to convince people to show them. But yeah, so this is worldwide. If you click on map, then it'll show you where people have planted narrowleaf mountain mint. There is always a chance that there's a misidentification because with this being citizen science, or people can make mistakes. But you can zoom in here and kind of view the mid-Atlantic area. I'm going to put research and map area, and let's see how many. So now we're down to just 41 observations. And does that mean that people have only photographed something visiting narrowleaf mountain mint 41 times? It doesn't. What it means is that they've only been, that observation field has only been added to 41 observations. So if you were really good at identifying that plant, you can look through butterfly observations, and when you find one, you can add that observation field, and then it gets pooled into this data, right? So this isn't really the most, I guess, popular plant. There are some other plants that I think I'll be able to pull up that have a few more observations than this, but I think it's just really easy on the eyes to like see, wow, look at that type of bee. Look at this. This is a little fly that's visiting over here, a milkweed bug. It's really a cool way to kind of just add something to what you're doing when you landscape, right? And you find something, visiting something. Okay. This other observation field is called the host plant ID. So this is really effective for helping other people to learn about what uses what as a host plant. So can anybody tell me what kind of caterpillar that is? I had no idea. Again, since I'm not from here, I didn't know what type of skipper that was. I had no clue. And then that caterpillar, anybody have a guess? So it is tulip tree beauty. So maybe some of you have heard of that moth. It's a pretty moth. And the interesting thing is that it was on common pawpaw, right? So as Anina triloba, I would have thought that it would be on tulip, but apparently this moth, the caterpillar, also uses pawpaw as a host. And you can see how tiny it is, by the way, right? Like this is my finger there. It was still kind of small. These moths do get kind of big or something like that. So this one was probably an early instar. Yeah, so again, here's that observation field, and I used a few different ones. Because again, the tricky part is because they're not standardized, some people will use one, some people will use another, and they're very similar. So unfortunately, you do get some overlap. But I'm going to click here, and I'll put observations with this field and value. And so you can see here, so again, because the observation fields aren't super, this one only has 25 observations that have that observation field added. The zebra swallowtail, right? So I guess they use pawpaw. Is that confirmed? They do? Okay. And then what else do we have? There's one called a pawpaw webworm moth. So what's really cool is, if you have pawpaw in your yard or in a park that you like to visit and you find something on it and you have no idea what it is, you can search this on iNaturalist and say, hey, what else is using pawpaw? Because you could do kind of like a Google search, but maybe something won't pop up that will pop up here so that you can kind of learn more. And I think, do we have any leaf miners here? Yeah, here we go. So here's another type of insect that has tulip tree in its name, and yet it's on pawpaw. So I guess pawpaw and tulip tree, they must be related. So this is kind of what a leaf miner looks like sometimes. And then they showed a picture of the plant as well. So let's look at some more flower visited to kind of get you guys a little bit more encouraged about looking at your yard and what comes to the flowers that you planted. Okay, so I have 4 different sets of flowers here. I know the picture's kind of small. Does anybody recognize some of these flowers, even though the picture is small? Okay, coneflower, right? This one here is a type of coneflower. Bee balm. So I think this one, it's in the genus for bee balm, but it's showing as bergamot. That's right. Okay, and then that's purple coneflower. I don't know what the scientific name of that one is. This one's buttonbush. I know it's kind of hard to see. And then at the bottom, does anybody recognize that? It's a type of milkweed, that color. Butterfly weed, right? So butterfly weed. So I'm going to click on 1, 2, 3, all 4 of these, just to show you some, some more eye candy. In my opinion, it's eye candy. Seeing all these different insects visiting different types of flowers. So here's milkweed, and these I've already kind of set, filter, so it's kind of like the mid-Atlantic area. And so 173 observations have been annotated, or have that observation field marked. And these are all the different things that you can expect to find on butterfly weed in this area, right? So another thing that I haven't shown you yet is you can click over here on species. Okay, if you click on species, you're not going to be seeing the observations. You're going to be seeing the species with kind of like a default picture. So those aren't pictures of it anymore on the butterfly weed, right? Or, yeah, we're looking at the butterfly weed now. It's just like a standard picture, but still, Regal Fritillaria apparently really likes butterfly weed, right? A lot of 13 of that's like the one that has the most. These are in order of most observations, so 13, 9, 8, 7, and they keep counting down. Okay, so that's kind of a way to get an idea of who likes this the most, right? What do we got for the button bush? Okay, so silver spotted skipper, red admiral. I'm gonna come to again to the species tab, and so this is a bumblebee that I've been trying to find since I've been up here. The perplexing bumblebee. I've seen like 5 or 6 species, but I still haven't seen the perplexing. So I gotta find some button bush. Apparently, that'll be the secret. So lots of bees, red admiral, silver spotted skipper, the tiger swallowtail's up here too. And it's not a giant data set, and it's because people haven't added these observation fields, right? That's what I'm trying to get you all interested in doing, going on to iNaturalist and recognizing, oh, I know that's buttonbush. Let me add that observation field so that there's more data. Okay, so that's buttonbush. Here's that purple coneflower. And again, I think this one's a pretty popular one for landscaping, right? So you can see all these pretty pictures.
Yeah.
It's blooming right now.
We've got it right out in front of the building.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So, you can just sit there for like 20 minutes or something like that and take pictures. And then when you post your observations to iNaturalist, you add that observation field and it gets pulled into this data, which, you can, I don't know, to me it's very satisfying. It's just so cool to see this big collection of biodiversity that you are attracting. Okay? And I'll show you one more, which is that the bee balm, or what was it called, bergamot.
Mm-hmm.
So 65 observations. I have a feeling that the people, I don't know if it's just that the bumblebees are maybe easier to photograph, or maybe, because there's always a chance that there's biases, right? Like if somebody is focusing on taking pictures of bees and then adding that observation field, but they maybe ignore the butterflies, maybe that's why there are so many, or maybe there really are more bees visiting some of these plants than the butterflies or the moths or other insects and pollinators. Okay, so that's the data, and you can again scroll through and kind of just enjoy the eye candy and compare and see if you can find some of these things visiting your own wild bergamot. Does anybody have this planted in their yard? Bergamot? Okay, cool. Is it blooming right now, or?
It is. We just planted it.
Okay, cool. Very cool. All right, so let's close some of these tabs, and let me go back to the presentation. So yeah, so that's just 4 random examples. You can do this with other plants to kind of get an idea of what data has been collected so far for something that you have in your yard. All right, and yeah, so this adds a whole new kind of like layer of entertainment, and I have some questions here to try to how many species of lepidoptera are you going to find in your newly planted butterfly weed, or which will be the last species that you're going to find before those flowers fade out, right? And that's something you can compare year over year. Which plant will bring the most visitors, and then, just to add a little bit of moth twist in here, can you spot any moths visiting these flowers at night? And I have some pictures. These are I haven't really looked at flowers at night up here yet, but those are some pictures from Miami of some moths visiting just common longweeds, right? And I also want to give some love to the longweeds, right? I don't know how you all feel about longweeds, but you like them? Okay. So they bring in and they provide so much, even if they're not native a lot of the times. So yeah. All right, so let's talk about leaf miners now. Okay, let's see how well we can see some of these images. So these are 3 different types of leaf miners. They're all different types of, they turn into moths, because besides moths, they are also the larval stage of some flies and some beetles, right? So it's not only moths that have leaf miner stages. And so when we say leaf miners, it's basically, imagine a leaf, which we all think of as being super, super flat, and yet there are these larval stages of some insects that are even flatter, and they fit inside, between the epidermal layers of the leaf. So, it's pretty incredible that they're just so tiny and they can fit in that little space. I'm going to show a video of a live leaf miner. So this is from, turn off the audio here. So this is from Charlie Eisman. He's kind of like the leaf miner guy on iNaturalist, and he's inspired me and a lot of other people to pay attention to leaf miners. Okay, so you can all maybe guess what's going on at one end and what's going on at the other end. Okay, and what's crazy is that pattern that it's making with its poop, with its frass, can help you identify what species of, what it's going to turn into, right? And of course, knowing what the plant is, the host plant, is very, very important as well. Okay, so it's funny because they kind of come out. Look how it's like. But it's so methodical in going from one side to the left, from left to right. It's pretty cool. Or gross, I don't know, it depends on.
It can be both.
So that's what a leaf miner is. And so tying whatever photos you get to the host plant is essential. Now, I don't know about you all, if you're very familiar with the plants that you have around you, but definitely in your garden when you're buying that bergamot, that that's the bergamot. So it's not really going to be too tricky to figure out what the plant is, right? But it's always good also to learn about what plants are around us. And yeah, that's important because some of these species are very closely tied to they'll only use one host plant, right? And when you add that observation field, it makes it easy to search the database. I have a little asterisk there because it's not super easy. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And the same goes with regular caterpillars. So I'm not telling you to use this host plant ID thing only for leaf miners. Just like I showed you that tulip tree beauty caterpillar, or whatever you find using a certain plant. You could also find, like, let's say a mushroom growing at the base of an oak tree, and you can mark in host plant ID oak, and then when someone's looking for that data, they'll find it, and maybe you'll help somebody identify the mushroom that was using that before they eat it. So these are some other types of leaf miners. The one on the right here, this one, is actually a fly, and it's really cool. Let me open this one up so we can see the picture a little bit more closely. Because a lot of times they do this. They'll start off really tiny, right? So you can see how down here it's like this little tiny squiggle, and then they get bigger as they eat more and more. Just like a kid growing up. And then eventually, you can maybe tell that on the back side here it could have come out, and then sometimes, yeah, you see like this little part right here. There's a tear in the leaf, and that's where sometimes they'll come out as like a little cocoon, and they'll turn into the moth and find a mate and start all over again. So this was on Verbena verticifolia, white vervain. And again, because I don't know like any of the plants that are up here, what I've been doing, every time I find a leaf miner, I make sure to take a picture right afterwards of the plant so that I can figure out what the plant is, with help on iNaturalist, and then I can add that observation field, right? So here they are, right over here. All right, and then this one is on black locust. So this is one of the most commonly observed of all the leaf miners from what I've seen and from the data on iNaturalist. It's probably because it's easy to identify. It kind of has a very unique shape. Kind of makes this like blob type of thing right in the middle with the midrib of the leaf. And are we all familiar with black locust? Have you all heard of that one? It's not native, is it? It is native. It is native. Okay. I've seen that like popping up like as a kind of like it turns into a tree, but I've seen it in a lot of places. So I was kind of like wondering, this must not be native. All right, good to know that it is. And then this is the project. So let's look at some of the data on iNaturalist. for leaf miners. Okay, so this shows us the general project on iNaturalist. Let's see, so in North America, 61,000 observations. I'm going to click here to kind of view the data, and I'm going to put a filter here for Maryland. So we're looking at Maryland now, and then you can start seeing some of the species. So oak blotch, minor moth. You see sometimes it kind of just looks like a blotch on the leaf. It's not always like a little intricate pattern. Okay, sometimes it is, sometimes it's more of a blotch. This is another very common one, right? And I know we're all familiar with Ilex, Ilex opaca.
A holly.
Holly. So if you look at holly, I'm telling you, you will find this. It's very easy to find. That one's a type of fly. There is also a moth that uses it from what I've seen. And in fact, let's see if we can find that data. So Phytomyza, okay. I don't know how to pronounce that. This one doesn't have an observation field added, so I'll show you how to do it right now. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type out host plant ID. I could have also just clicked it since it was already, one of the ones that I use a lot. And then I know that it's visiting Ilex American Holly, right? So I can click there, and then I'm going to hit add. And so now I just kind of added this to that pool of data for the things that are visiting American Holly. And then I can come over here. I clicked on this, and I can click observations with this field and value, and that's going to open up the page where it's going to show me examples of things using American Holly. So if you have American Holly, and there are 17 different things so far that have been, so sometimes people don't use it exactly right, because a magnolia green jumping spider hanging out on the holly. See, so this is kind of like, I disagree with the person or the people that have added that as host plant, because I mean, I guess if you're like thinking of it as like a hotel and it's like, oh, welcome to my American Holly, I'd love to host you. But, I would say it's better to use it as like, there's a direct relationship between, whether it's that leaf miner using it or something else eating it. Right. Right. Exactly. The holly, very good. Okay. So, yeah. So you can see pictures of it, right? Here's it has a nice name, native holly leaf miner. And you can kind of see the difference. Look at the comparison. This is a little bit wider, and it's kind of like white, whereas this one, it's kind of like a more narrow line, I guess. So that's kind of how the host plant ID observation field works, right? And that's the project. So let me go back to
what do the adults of these look like? Are they completely nondescript? Or
that's a great question. Sometimes they're beautiful. Sometimes they do kind of look nondescript. And it's funny because sometimes when you're trying to find an example, you're just going to run into a million pictures of mines. Mm-hmm. Some people also collect these. They'll put it in a little, jar and wait for the moth to come out, because sometimes the species is unknown, right? And that happens a lot, especially in South Florida. I've helped out with some species where I actually need to send them to the guy who made the project, Charlie, because he knows an entomologist that's like ready to describe a new species, because people don't study this stuff, right? And we can all be a part of it, and I think that's pretty cool.
Are all leaf miners moths?
No, so some leaf miners will also be flies, and some will be like this one right here, Calicomyza verbenia, I guess. You can actually come over here to where it says taxonomy, and it's really cool because iNaturalist will give you a breakdown of the, what it is, right? So here it is as the species, here's the genus, and as you scroll up, you'll see it's part of the order Diptera, so it's a fly, right?
And some are beetles, you said?
Yeah, some are beetles as well. So I'm trying to find a picture of this as an adult. Oh, this one is a fly, not a. Let's see if we can find any pictures on iNaturalist of adults. So see what I mean? A lot of these are mines and the mines and the more mines.
I suppose people don't take pictures of flies that often.
Right, and I mean the other thing is sometimes people are just not interested because it just looks like it's just another fly. But also they can be really tiny and jumpy, and so they're harder to notice. They're harder to photograph. So yeah, you can filter this by life stage. If someone's added that annotation, then you can do that. So look at this one. That's like the little tiny cocoon, right? Because flies also go through that metamorphosis, like leps do. And so this one hasn't been marked, but I can mark it as pupa. Oh, look, yeah, it's technically called a puparium, which is the hardened skin of the mature larva with the. So you see, you get people like this on iNaturalist, and it's really cool because you can learn a lot about the most random, obscure thing, and it's like you'll never get bored if you start looking into, going into all these nooks and crannies. Like you don't even need to leave your backyard; you will be entertained forever, learning about all these different things that you can find. And so that's basically what I've really gotten into with iNaturalist, and I'm always trying to let people know that. It's not just, oh, what plant is this? And you take a picture with the app and maybe you'll find out it's also, much deeper than that. And you can really, I guess, cover a lot of ground and get really into so many different rabbit holes. So let's see if we can find a moth. I want to find one of these let's try the native polyleaf miner. I think the problem here is that I have this set for Florida for this. And I know I kind of like click around quick. If you've never been on the iNaturalist website, it's kind of like daunting, but it just takes like a little bit of time and practice. And I think the website's pretty user-friendly. The app, in my opinion, isn't very user-friendly. I don't use the app a whole lot myself. Yeah, I'm only finding pictures of the mine. Now, I'm only checking on iNaturalist. I'm sure you can go on like a resource like Bug Guide. Have you all heard of bugguide.net? So let's try. I'm going to try searching the name of this, which is Let me try native polyleaf miner. Polyleaf miner. I think see if this works. Okay, so here it is on Bug Guide. And let's see, this person.
Looks like
here
a
you
fly.
go. There you go. Oh, but you know what's funny is sometimes they get parasitized. So there are all kinds of flies and wasps that will find the leaf mine. So again, you know what I was talking about with the layers? Well, sometimes instead of getting the little moth that you're supposed to get, too late, something came in and laid its eggs on that and ate it, and then instead you get the parasite instead of the moth. So, it's pretty crazy. I think that's probably what happened here, that this was, oh wait, no, this is Phytomyza. Oh, so that's not a moth. Okay, so this is the leaf mine. It's not a parasite. But I know flies do it and wasps do it. All right. So that's a little bit about leaf mines. Pretty cool picture, that one. I don't know if that's two different ones or just one that kind of looped all around the leaf. Could be either one. And so yeah, that was by Charlie Eisman. He's like I think he has a book published on leaf mines of North America. All right, so I don't know if anybody wants to ask some questions before I explain kind of how to do this. Because again, I feel like this is something that's better done, with you on the computer, or like I'm even happy to coach you. I'm going to show my email at the end, and we could arrange to go on Zoom, at a later date at any time, and I'm happy to explain how this all works. But does anybody have any questions for now?
You normally use the app to take a picture and capture initially, while you're out on a hike or something like that.
So that's
come back later.
That's a good question, because you can't add the observation field through the app. What I tend to do, because I take so many pictures, so if I were to take a picture and post it on the app and then find something, it would take so long. And I'm so crazy with iNaturalist that I walk around with 3 cameras. Okay, I use my phone to take pictures of plants. I use a camera with a macro lens to take pictures of little tiny things, and then I have a long lens for taking pictures of birds or bugs that won't let me get close enough. So because I take all of these different pictures at the same time, I just wait till I get home. I upload all the pictures onto my computer, and then I also walk around with a GPS that links the location based on the time that I took the picture, so that I have an exact location. So I personally, just because I'm just on another level of crazy with iNaturalist, if I were to use the app one by one, it would just take me too long. And I mean, I'll show you how many observations I've posted, because that's always something that people see that and they're like, oh my God, is that all you do? And I mean, it kind of is. But you see, I'm at 71,000 observations that I posted to iNaturalist. So, there's this thing called the City Nature Challenge. Have you all heard of the City Nature Challenge? Yep. It's a 4-day event, City Nature Challenge. And so it's a global event where, Baltimore has one, DC has one, Miami has one. They have them in other parts of the world too, in other countries. And it's like a global BioBlitz, right? So BioBlitz is a magic word here. And during a City Nature Challenge, I regularly will post like 2,000 observations across 4 days. And so, yeah, my wife gets like a little bit like, I'm coming home, and I'm like there blacklighting, like taking pictures of all the moths. And then like the next day comes and I'm like snorkeling, trying to get all the fish and the corals and everything. So, yeah, I usually don't use the app just because it's, slow. I did at the beginning, but then I just ended up, getting hooked, and it's like an addiction, honestly. So yeah, I love.
I had to go buy a $5,000 camera.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that, because I got my camera used on eBay for like $300. It's like a DSLR camera. Nothing. It's a Nikon D7200, so it's nothing too fancy. But it's like an old camera. It's like from 2015. So talking about cameras, that's like super old. And it works great. So you see all these prices, you can get it used for like $400. And
the lens.
Well, the lens also. I'm using a lens from the 90s, a macro lens, and it was like $150. And I've gotten some pictures where it's like, I'm just like, wow, this little lens can do what it was born to do, Let me see if I can find some pictures really quick. So this was at Fort McHenry. I went with my sister last week. And so these are pictures of a little spider, a wolf spider, that I got with, I have a little flash too, which is like $20. What I'm trying to say is, if you do get really into it, nature photography it doesn't have to be super, super expensive. You don't need to get like crazy equipment. Although you do look like a crazy person if you have like one camera here and then the like one with the long lens, which is, I need somebody to take a picture of me when I'm doing that, because it looks pretty loopy.
As long as you have a bucket hat and cargo.
Oh yeah.
What do you use for your photo library?
To organize my photos.
Yeah.
So I just use like the standard Windows. I don't even know what it's called. I guess File Explorer or something like that. And so if I scroll through here, you can kind of see like these images. It says 2023-07-19. Those are the ones I took with my phone. And then I'll scroll down, and then the ones that say D72 are the macro ones, and then the ones that say DSC8450, those are the ones that I took with the long lens. So it does get to be a lot. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with all the pictures I take, but in fact, I'll show you my iNaturalist to-do list. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 folders that are just from this trip that I'm like, oh my god, I need to get on this already. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. To me, it's very satisfying. I also played Pokemon as a kid. So if you're familiar with Pokemon, gotta catch them all. I'm always trying to like find new species, and it's just really, really fun when you do. So yeah, I have a link on the presentation. So if you're interested in learning how to add the observation fields or the annotations, this link here that you can get. Let me put this up so that I'm just gonna skip a little bit to the end where it says questions. And then, if you wanted to watch that part, or if you wanted help figuring out how to do that, that's the email that I kind of have for any iNaturalist questions to help people out. And that QR code or that link will take you to a document where you can, view past presentations, and this specific presentation is going to be up there too, if you're, wanting to learn specifically about these annotations or observation. Yeah, I really enjoyed, iNaturalist has made it, I feel like my trip a lot more fruitful in terms of like figuring out what I'm looking at, right? Because it's kind of like the first step to learning about the natural history of something. You need to know what it is. So, like the Isabella tiger moth, learning that it was called the woolly bear, and that the blood helps it to, or the hemolymph, some chemical that it has. All these things are just like fascinating. And yeah, learning the name is that first step. Instead of just looking at it and being like, oh wow, that's cool, it's really nice. It takes it to another level to know what it is and figure out some other things.
You've been on your own biodiversity website?
Yes, they're linked. So I know iNaturalist data goes into it, bug guide data goes into it. I think So far, I've contributed one species to it that wasn't on the database, and it was like some obscure fly or something like that. You know? Again, just because there's so many things to see, you know, it's really fun to like open your eyes and see everything.
There's this bush, and I walk my dog along the wooded edge. There's this bush. It's each leaf is full of holes, but I've never been able, and I've turned it over to see if anything's eating it, or if it's partially. I've not discovered what is making these ghost leaves already.
Do you know
and
what?
They're still green.
Do you know what the plant is?
No, I don't.
All right.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
going to
so
find out.
if you could post that on iNaturalist, I'll go, and then you can probably use that host plant ID to try to figure it out. Yeah, because you can use it not just for leaf mines, or you could also just find evidence of something feeding on something, and where you can like either see the frass, the poop, or just those like little holes or whatever, and you can figure that out. Definitely. Yeah. No, it's I know you. Any questions?
Like, I only go 6 because I was afraid of unnatural. So, like, could you take like your seek stuff and put it in
I
there?
think you can. So I don't have a lot of experience with Seek because Seek came out after I was already really, you know, and they're linked together. So if any of you haven't heard of Seek before, SEEK, it's an app that's kind of linked to iNaturalist, but I don't know exactly how to transfer those to iNaturalist. I've never really used it. Does anybody know? Has anybody done that? I'm assuming that there's probably like an option to click on it, or if you like look it up on YouTube, it'll probably explain how to transfer from Seek into iNaturalist.
Maybe seek is like baby on
It is, and it's also used specifically, you know, in classrooms because they don't want kids posting, you know, where they are in their backyard, and you know that's kind of like a liability. So Seek is kind of like the safer way to do it. And it's just more private, you know. So I think that's true. But you know, whether or not you even have an account on iNaturalist, you can still go onto iNaturalist.org. I really recommend everybody does that and kind of just click around under Explore. I mean, go to South Africa, go to Colombia, see what kind of birds people are seeing there or the plants. Like every once in a while, I'll like see some news headline, and it'll talk about like some island in like the Pacific. And I'm just like, I've never heard of that place. What do they have there? And I'll go on iNaturalist and I'll see like all these crazy birds that I've never heard of and other things that are found there. And sometimes it's really cool because you'll see like a moth that's like in the same genus as one that you know, but it like has like a twist to it. So it's like a funny relative of the one that you know, and it's like, oh, I know your cousin. Yeah, I saw it like a few days ago. So you know, it's fun.
You sign up and use a password and all that business.
Not to do the searching on the database. You can, you know, just go on the website. So let me see if I can. I'll log out here. I'll show you what I mean. So let's see. iNaturalist. Log out. So right now I'm not signed in or anything like that. And you can come up here to this little magnifying glass, and that's where you can type in either the name of a country or the city. You can type in pretty much anything. I mean, you can type in, like, let's say I want to see tiger moths. I can type in tiger moths, and then this pops up, and then I can click View Observations, and it's showing me all of the tiger moth observations worldwide. So 672,000, close to 2,500 species, and then again, you can click on species and see which is the most commonly observed one. Right? There are big biases here towards the United States because North America, Canada, Mexico, this is where iNaturalist is most used. But you know, if you wanted to see specifically, like I don't know, in Japan, what are the tiger moths that they have over there? You can put Japan here, and now it's showing me specifically the moths of Japan. And it's funny because a lot of these don't have common names in English because they're probably only found in Japan, you know, an island, and so they'll just have the scientific name. So. You know, you can really just, it's so entertaining, it's a lot of fun. It's like that childlike curiosity, you can spend hours here just like exploring and learning about whatever you're curious about. So it's really cool. And yeah, see I didn't log in, I just clicked the little magnifying glass up at the top. And if you find any of this overwhelming or like, you know, confusing, you can email me. I insist. I'm happy to help anybody who wants to learn how to do anything. I'll call you and I'll say, oh, look, click on this thing. And like, just for fun, because I want other people to see how fun this is. Any questions?
Awesome, Joe. Thank you.